There's a particular kind of pounding on a front door that tells you two things at once. Your lottery dream jet ski nap is officially canceled, and something with a badge, a clipboard, or a very expensive sense of self-importance wants to interrupt your Saturday. I learned that sound one Saturday morning standing in my living room in nothing but taco print boxer briefs, half a bowl of cereal in my hand, wondering why the world hates me before coffee. It was barely 8:15, sun still stuck low and lazy over the neighborhood, the kind of place where the grass looks guilty because it's been chemically enhanced and the silence smells faintly of judgment. I yanked the door open and froze two cops on my mat, one older and exhausted, like he'd been collecting humanity's worst hits for a living, the other young-built and giving off bench energy in a way that made my taco underwear feel like a criminal outfit. "Morning," the older one said, which is the polite way of saying we'd both rather be anywhere else. "You Mr. Mark Henderson?" he asked. "Depends." I thought, shifting my weight in a way that said, "I'm innocent mostly," and tried to look casual, which is a challenge when you're trying to be stern in your underwear. The young cop fished a notebook out of his pocket. "We received a 911 call," he said. My brain did a weird flip fire gas leak hostage situation. "Regarding a Peeping Tom incident," the older one finished, eyes sliding to my living room like there might be binoculars lounging on the couch. At that point, I looked down at my underwear, then back at them. "You're kidding, right?" I said. "This is a prank. Where's Dave hiding in the bushes?" There was no Dave. Brenda Higgins, it turned out, had phoned. Brenda, a neighbor who treated property lines like an international border dispute, who once called the city because my recycling bin had the audacity to sit 3 inches left of where she expected it to be, had seen me through some imagined peephole. She said you were holding a black surveillance device moving around, crouching. The younger cop read flat as a ditch. I pointed at the floor where, sure enough, something lay, a black helmet-looking thing on the rug. The cop kicked it with his toe. "Is that a video game?" he asked. "It's a VR headset," I said. I was playing a rhythm game, swinging at virtual blocks. I was crouching to dodge a virtual wall. I was not in possession of binoculars, nor do I own a Peeping Tom starter kit. He looked at the window, then back at me. "From this angle, you can't even see her house," he said. The older cop sighed, rubbed his forehead. "We follow up on calls. There's clearly no criminal intent here unless poor rhythm is now a felony." The young cop almost smiled. "Keep the blinds closed when you do your cardio," the sergeant advised, and left with the kind of gait that says he'd already rehearsed this day's donut order. Of course, Brenda was watching the whole exchange like a hawk who'd found a particularly juicy molehill. Her front door cracked open as they walked across the street. Of course she'd been watching. I leaned my forehead against the door after they left and felt the adrenaline turn into pure, slow-burn annoyance. Soggy cereal ruined morning dignity in tatters. I tried to go back to sleep. Couldn't. So I threw on shorts, went outside for air, and scoped the battlefield. Brenda's house sat a little higher than mine. Developers love those subtle elevations that guarantee awkward neighborly stares. She appeared on her patio like a final boss-level floral robe, like upholstery curlers, like tiny pink landmines, garden shears in hand for emphasis. She marched to the edge of her patio, the tactical high ground, and shrieked that she'd seen me spying on her for 45 minutes. I told her the truth. VR headset virtual world couldn't see a thing, but truth is a poor defense when someone's already authored a novel about you. She escalated, threatened the HOA, the mayor, her nephew at sanitation, who apparently could confiscate trash cans as some sort of municipal nuclear option. I laughed because what else do you do when someone weaponizes the garbage collection? She screamed that I was a nuisance, a peeping Tom, a community blight. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in a violent way, just a precise, cold little snap that said, "Fine. If you want privacy, I'll give you privacy." I went inside, cracked a soda, and instead of healing through passive-aggressive social media muttering, I opened city code. I read HOA covenants. I read zoning bylaws like a man trying to teach himself to love tax law. There it was, an obscure relic from 1974, tucked in a subsection about artistic beautification and drainage, a provision that allowed freestanding artistic installations or windbreak structures in drainage-adjacent nuisance lots to extend up to 10 feet. Nuisance lots. Brenda's property had a drainage flag. My property didn't. I had the right to a windbreak. I could build art. 10 feet. I felt that slow, terrible smile creep across my face. "This is petty," some voice said. "This is beautiful," said another voice, which I'd rather listen to. I called a friend who hates rules and embraces chaos, Tony, the kind of contractor who sounds like he's been gargling gravel and whiskey. "I need a wall," I said. "Legal. 10 foot. Artistic on one side, pretty on mine, raw on hers." He laughed the laugh of a man who knows exactly where the fun hides. "We can make it earthquake-proof," he said. "We can make it mean." By Monday, Brenda had rigged her yard with industrial-looking cameras and a boombox aimed like a small cannon at my bedroom window opera at 7 a.m. because apparently her diplomacy consisted of decibel levels. I called the police back. They shrugged. "Civil matter," they said. The HOA rules about fences and aesthetics. No relief. The bureaucracy was a tarp over my options, so I hired Tony. Tony came with a crew and a flatbed, a truck that looked like it had survived a war, and a sticker of suggestions on the back, and they started digging. Brenda howled at the sight of heavy machinery backing in. She called the police. Tony taped the permit, the legitimate stamped permit, to my back door like a cape. The officers checked the code printout. "It checks out," they said. She swore, sprayed water on the workers, threatened to call everyone in civic authority. We poured concrete anyway. 3 days of sawdust profanity that sounded like a choir in the posts rose. 10 feet of cedar sentinels took shape between our properties like polite, towering judgment. The wall blocked her cameras, her opera, her view, and the first time she saw the mass of wood rising between us, she went small. She turned inward. I felt oddly victorious and ashamed. In equal measure, the petty victory tastes like sweet gasoline. But we weren't finished. The clause said artistic installation, and I had an artist I trusted with municipal vengeance, Snake, a muralist who made eyes that could stare into your faults. He arrived with a van full of paint and scaffolding, and within hours sketched an eye on the side facing Brenda. Not a cutesy eye, a hyper-realistic, bloodshot, unblinking thing that looked like it could reflect your secret sins in the pupil. Brenda screamed when she saw it. She dropped her tea, porcelain scattered like final acts. "It's demonic," she cried at the emergency HOA meeting 2 nights later, clutching a photo of the eye like an accusation. The community center filled with people who never went to meetings because nothing breaks apathy like good theater. The HOA president, a man named Dave, who secretly despised Brenda's measuring stick zeal, squinted at our permit and the code printouts and declared after a pause that smelled suspiciously like amusement that yes, the paperwork was in order. They asked me to soften the gaze. "For the good of the community," the board said. I pretended to consider it and then called Snake back. "So the HOA wants it softened," I told him. He laughed until he fell off his crate and then painted long, lush eyelashes on the giant eye because compromise is more terrifying when it's sincere. The eye didn't look kinder. It looked like a weary diva mid-meltdown. Brenda gave up on patio life. She closed blackout curtains, planted fast-growing trees, and retreated into darkness. A month later, I sat on my patio at sunset, the cedar glowing warm and golden, its grain neat and private. I couldn't see her cameras, I couldn't hear her opera. The world had returned to a civilized level of annoyance. I popped a beer, put my VR headset back on, and loaded up the hardest song I had, the one that makes you sweat and swear and feel alive. I danced like a fool, lightsabers slicing at invisible blocks, and for the first time in a long time, nobody was watching. If you ask me what the lesson is, and you know I will tell you because this is exactly the kind of story that pretends to be a cautionary tale, it's this: boundaries matter, and sometimes the law is a crooked tool that people will use to bully you out of living as you choose. But also escalation begets escalation, and if you meet paranoia with passive acceptance, you'll never sleep again. There's dignity in standing your ground, yes, but there's also a cost to turning the screws for sport. I won my privacy, and I lost the part of myself that thought neighbors might be temperate. So I'll ask you, when does quiet life justify a 10-foot wall and a painted eye? Was I right to lean into a loophole and build art that made her hide? Or did I take something too far? Tell me, have you ever had to draw a line so loudly that it became a wall? Share your story and tell me whether the fence was justice or just revenge in a cedar suit.